Would Brian Thompson, the CEO who was assassinated last week, still be alive if he had an executive protection team? Welcome to this week's protection review here at the EP Source, where our goal is to deliver quality information and practices to those principals looking to hire executive protection and those practitioners who are working with executives providing executive protection. So today we're going to dive into a review of last week's assassination that took place in New York City and determine what could have been done better if there was an executive protection team in place and what could have happened after the fact. We're going to look at three main things as it relates to this incident. One being pre-operation considerations that should have been taken or would have been taken into account before this operation took place to bring the CEO to New York City. We're going to review the actual action to include video footage and walk through what happened in the altercation and what we could have done to prevent assassination. And then the third thing is emergency actions that would have taken place after the actual shooting incident to hopefully save Brian Thompson's life. This in no way is a review of the political spectrum or political tension going on between the company, Brian, and the local populace and what could have been done. This is just a memo for all CEOs who are considering having protection to mitigate their own life. Getting into considerations for executives, specifically Brian Thompson in this situation, we want to go over what could have been done before this event to mitigate him ever having been on that street, vulnerable to take the gunfire that he did. It's easy for executives a lot of times when an event takes place like this to make it a very distal interaction. And what I mean by that is they separate themselves from the actual event and they say, well, if it happens to me, it's not my problem anymore, or that happened to him, I have a totally different situation and scenario. And a lot of times this is just a naive statement altogether. If you're a CEO, it's absolutely paramount that you work with some type of firm or organization such as ourselves or other fantastic ones around the country to get an accurate review of your threat profile, a thorough threat assessment, and that may mean you only need some type of informational asset to help determine your threat or reassess every so often. It may mean you need a full-time detail around you, or it could just be details for events like this. Any way you cut it, it is absolutely paramount that you get that done beforehand. Now, what the team would actually do beforehand in a scenario like this, we would conduct thorough advances from a threat assessment standpoint, the adversaries of the individual, the company, any actions taken by the company that would introduce or produce a threat, any threats that have been made toward the client or the company that need to be taken into serious consideration. We would conduct physical and virtual advances of the entirety of the trip of this individual. So all the events that they're going to be participating in, all of the routes to and from places they're going to be going, hotels, determine where tier 1, 2, and 3 trauma centers are from a medical practice around the area. So that way, if the client is injured, we can get them there in a timely manner to make sure that we can mitigate ultimate death if that is the case in a violent encounter like this. And then we're also going to make sure that the team is well prepared with equipment on them to take care of situations like this and staff appropriately from an information side and a physical people side on the ground to make sure there's a team around this individual. So having discussed everything that we would have done before this engagement, I want to dive now into the actual footage and do a review of what actually happened, the likely motivators for the actual assassin, and then talk about what a team would have done differently. So first and foremost, if we just have this still frame before we hit play, we can see that the individual, Brian Thompson, the principal, is walking down the street and the assassin steps out from behind this SUV and trains the weapon directly on him. Now, right from this freeze frame, we can see that there's a lot of people around. It is very well lit. There are brake lights on, so somebody's in that vehicle in front of the SUV that he stepped out from behind. Those tail lights are on, so we can assume that there's somebody in that vehicle as well. There's somebody exiting this building, and there's a security camera. This was not done by a professional. In my opinion, this is a passion crime or something where the individual felt self-righteous enough where he wanted people to see this happen. We can tell that by he doesn't care about the population, the parameters of the environment. He doesn't walk up and close the distance between him and the principal. He takes the shot as soon as he's able to. Usually a professional will want to close the distance and make sure that he gets the principal killed in the first shot. So that's what we see immediately from this still frame. Now, as we hit play, we can see that the firearm immediately malfunctions after the first round, but he does hit the CEO because he starts to go down. We can see that Brian Thompson is now off the screen, fell off to the side of that building, but the assassin now fixes the weapon system, gets it back running, conducts an immediate action, and continues towards the CEO. Another good thing to point out here is this weapon system, based on its operation, was not test fired. So he didn't know it was going to malfunction after he pulled the trigger. Upon the malfunction happening, it is likely that the round did not eject because this is a small caliber weapon. It does look like it is suppressed, which means that the gas from a smaller caliber weapon would not properly cycle the function of operations of this weapon system. So that's probably why it malfunctioned. He did conduct a pretty hasty immediate action and then immediately start walking towards the target again. However, that is time that could have, if there was a team there, they could have jumped in and mitigated that, but we'll get to that in the next segment. He is not urgent in his approach back up to the CEO. He makes sure that the weapon is back working. He continues fire on shots. We can also take note that there are still cars driving by. He does not proceed to run away. He proceeds to walk and then increase his pace as he's leaving. Almost looks surprised that nobody saw him, and he then continues to speed up his pace as he leaves. So I don't think that he actually was intending on being able to escape the situation based on that action. Let's rewind this and talk through what a protection team would have done or should have done better. So first and foremost, transitional spaces are the most dangerous space for any principal to be walking through, whether that is from the door to the vehicle, from a vehicle to a plane, from a venue to a speaking engagement. These are all times where a CEO is vulnerable and there is the highest probability that they are going to have an altercation take place. But if we can control those spaces as much as possible, that is absolutely what we want to do. We want to have one of our drivers and we want to shuttle the CEO to and from the building. But in the case like this, if the CEO said, "It's nice out, I want to walk," we would typically have a close protection team around the individual. This could be somebody who is literally shoulder to shoulder or very close proximity to him, but somebody else who is a little bit in standoff distance, who may be dressed more low profile to observe threats in the ancillary area. We could also have somebody positioned across the street who is looking at the entire environment. A place like New York City, this is pretty common, just to gather more information and relay it over communications to the team. As he walked by this vehicle, the team would have identified that somebody was looking suspicious from behind a vehicle. They're covering, he has a hood on. He's not swinging his arms. If he's walking, maybe he has a brisk pace that he's walking up, but definitely would have been made note by the team. And let's say that the team didn't catch it at all. This guy just pops out from behind a vehicle. The second person who is trailing the CEO would have been able to close the distance and hopefully hit the shooter before he was able to get his first shot off. Now, again, let's say worst case scenario, he's able to get that first shot off. The individual being close protection, one of the two individuals would have been able to close that distance during that malfunction and get the CEO out of the way of this altercation. At least take the CEO after having been hit the first time, move him to a safe location, have the other individual suppress the person who took the shot, but we're not going to have another shot taken at the CEO. In a perfect world, this first shot could have hit the armor that the protector was wearing. We also don't know where the first shot placement was, so as long as it wasn't lethal, this gives us now a window to conduct some type of casualty medicine right there on the spot and get him to a tier 1 trauma center locally for further evaluation from medical professionals. Now, given that we conducted all this advanced work prior to this, we would know exactly where to get him to. We would have a vehicle ready and an evacuation plan to get him to that facility. Now, we would have also been able to detain the individual who took the shot. So this individual would have not been able to get away, and we could have gotten him to the authorities even faster and also kept him from injuring anybody else in the situation, because in this case, he shot the CEO and there was no outside casualties. There was no bullets that traveled through the CEO and hit anybody else, but there could be more casualties. So we want to make sure that we stop the shooter at all costs. If you're a CEO, CXO, C-suite type of individual, a high net worth or ultra high net worth individual, maybe you sit on boards of directors, if you feel that you're somebody at risk, this is a great call to action to just let you know that this is your responsibility to look into. Educate yourself first and foremost. Look at resources that exist online, purchase books, try to just make yourself more aware of how you can mitigate assassination attempts like this and other violent encounters. Look into procuring a team. First and foremost, get a professional assessment done. You can reach out to the EP source. We do provide threat assessments and risk mitigation plans. We can help you arrange a team for your protective needs through one of our sister companies. But first and foremost, educate yourself. You may not need a team full time. Maybe you need teams for engagements such as a business event in New York City, for example, but you might not need it all the time. Understanding what type of risks you're exposed to, what type of threats, how to mitigate them, and then you can determine what level of care that you need. So contact a professional for more details. Unfortunately, if you're a CEO or ultra high net worth individual, violent events like this can take place and there's no amount of money that can give you your life back. However, there are steps that you can take beforehand to mitigate things like this and provide the best chance of success and give yourself a level of protection that others just can't. So With that being said, I appreciate you taking the time of watching this video. For any other questions, resources, or any comments, leave them below. Would love to start a conversation on this, but that is a Protector review of the assassination that took place last week in New York City.